In this tutorial, we're going to create the vector layout that you can see on the screen. This is for a raised panel door, and in the companion tutorial to this we'll show you how to create the toolpath for it. We're going to start by making use of the software's snap grid. We're going to switch that on, and then we're going to use that to help us sketch our outline shape and make edits to create the curve at the top. And we're going to join that, offset it to create our inner edge, and then working on the decorative pieces in the middle, we're going to start by drawing and offsetting an ellipse to create the rings. We're going to import some vector clip art for our flourish, rotate and position that and make copies of it around the ellipse. And then finally we're going to import the flower design and scale that and position it in the middle before altering the position of all our decorative pieces to sit within the panel in the way that we'd like to see it. So let's go ahead and start a copy of the software. So let's begin by clicking on the option to create a new file, and for this particular job we're going to make the width of our file 16 inches, going to make the height of our file 22 inches, material is going to be 3/4 of an inch, we're going to set Z0 off the top of the block, and for the purposes of drawing laying the part out, I'm going to set the datum in the center so that the middle of our job area is X0, Y0. We're working in inches, we're going ahead and hit OK. And for laying this part out, we're going to make use of the snap grid that's available within the software. So I'm going to hit F4 on the keyboard, the shortcut key. That will bring up the snap settings. We can also access those through the edit drop down menu. I'm going to check the option to snap to grid, and I'm going to set a grid spacing of 1 inch. So we're going to use quite a large grid spacing and hit OK. Next I'm going to come over and sketch a polyline. So we'll click on the draw polyline tool here, and we're going to start at the location here X-7 Y8, and I'm going to click, make sure the cursor is showing you that you're on the snap point. You can see how that changes as I move it over there, and it shows me the coordinate in the 2D view. So I'm going to click there, then I'm going to come down, and we're going to have a length of 18, angle of 90, so that's essentially coming down to the one almost in the corner, straight line across to the other side, and then up to the point which is level for the first part we created, which is another length 18 line. I'm going to click there. Now I would like to stop creating that line but stay in this function, so I'm going to hit the space bar, and that will finish the line we're working on but allow me to stay in create polyline and draw another polyline. So I'm going to come across here, I'm going to snap to this point here, the end of this line, and I'm going to come up and snap to the point in the middle here, which is 1 inch below the top of the part. So we click on that, and that has created a straight line between the middle here and the end of that line. I've now finished with the create polyline function, so I'm going to click on the right mouse key, and that will accept that. I'm going to hit N on the keyboard for node editing. That's the shortcut key for node editing. We could also use this icon here. And I'm going to hover over the line here so you can see the cursor changes and I get the wave showing below it, and that shows me that I'm over a span of a line and allows me to use shortcut keys such as the B key, which will turn this into a Bezier span. So if I hit B on the keyboard, this becomes a Bezier curve and we get the handles here. And now what I can do with the mouse is click on these handles, and I'm just going to drag it so it's in a horizontal line from the node here 3 inches over. So 1, 2, 3 using the snap grid. The same with the top here, 1, 2, 3, and then let go with the point snapped there. So I'm happy with my line. I'm going to go back to selection mode. I'm going to hit escape on the keyboard to do that. That's the shortcut key. Now we've created the nice curve for our top here, and what I want to do is create a mirrored copy over the other side. So I'm going to select this, I'm going to come down to mirror selected objects. Within here I'm going to say I want to flip about the job center, in this case, which is in the middle here. We could also just flip this to the right as well because of the way this part's oriented, but here I'm going to say flip about job center, create a mirrored copy, click on the button that says flip horizontal, and hit close. So at this point I have three separate vectors that I've created. I would like to get these to be a single closed vector. And you may think that a way we could do that would be to group them together. But grouping wouldn't join these and make them a single vector so that if I went and profile machined it, it would cut all the way around that vector. It would still treat that, even within a group, as three separate objects. Certainly grouping gives me benefits for moving and editing and things like that, but if I need my vectors to be a true closed single object, then I would use the function to join them rather than group them together. So here I'm going to take all three of these vectors, we'll just box select them. I'm going to come over and click on the icon to join open vectors. It's going to show me the parameters here for the tolerance, so as long as the endpoints of these vectors are within this distance, it will join them together, and it's showing me that at the moment I have three open vectors, and after I click the join button I'll have one closed vector, which is what I want. So I'm going to click the join button and close this, and now if we click on this we can see the dashed line showing me that I've got a single vector. So I know when I machine the outside shape of my raised panel that I'm going to use a specialist cutter, and that has a cutting width of 1 3/8 of an inch, and I have that information from the manufacturer of the cutter. So I'm going to take my outside vector and offset it inwards by that distance so I know where the edge of my OG shape is going to be around the panel. That'll also be a vector that I'll be able to use when I come to machine the part so I can profile around it. So here we're going to take this outside edge, I'm going to come down to the offset function, click on this, and I want to offset inwards here by this distance of 1 3/8 of an inch, so I could either type in 1.375 or we could calculate it with 1 plus 3 divided by 8, so 1 plus 3/8, and then hit equals on the keyboard. So when I hit equals it will calculate that value for me, and I'm just going to click on the button to offset. So there's my inner edge of my border shape. Now let's go ahead and add some decorative elements to our panel that we're going to V-carve into the surface of it. I'm going to come over and start with an oval shape or an ellipse. So under create vectors here I'm going to click on this icon to draw an ellipse, and I'm going to use the snapping again in order to draw this. I'm going to go over the middle of the job so I see the cursor say X0, Y0, and I'm going to click and hold down the mouse button and drag this until I get an ellipse which is 8 wide and 10 high, and you can see those values being displayed in the draw ellipse form on the left of the interface. Here I'm using the snapping again to snap to this point here to get those or to get that point, get those values. I'm going to let go, and that'll create my ellipse for me at that size in that position. So we can go ahead and hit close. Next I'd like to take my elliptical shape and make some offsets. So I'm going to come down, make sure it's still selected, and come down to the offset selected vectors icon. I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to tell the software that I want to offset inwards, and we're going to put in a distance of 0.15, and I'm going to make sure that this select new option is checked, because after this is offset I would like it to select the newly created shape that we've just offset. That'll allow me to keep offsetting those inwards. So here I'm going to hit offset, we'll create our new shape, and you can see that's been selected. Then I'm going to put in a value of 0.25 and hit offset again, and again that's offset it and selected the new shape. And now finally I'm going to put in another offset distance of 0.15 and hit offset, and there's my set of elliptical decorative shapes. Our next task is to import some vector clip art. This has been supplied to us by vectorart.com, as have a number of files that we use throughout the tutorials, and we'd like to thank them for allowing us to use their excellent artwork in our videos. So to bring this in, we're going to come over and click on the icon to import vectors from a file. I'm going to select the file flourish.eps from the project folder, and I'm going to hit open. And we can see that's imported our file, and when it's imported it's automatically selected, so that's why we can see it as dashed lines. If I zoom in here, you can see that this flourish is made up of a number of individual pieces. And while I'm editing this, it will be beneficial to me if I could keep them all related together. So what I'm going to do is put them into a group to make that a bit easier. As we discussed earlier, the idea of a group is to keep parts related, but to still maintain them as individual separate pieces if I need to ungroup them. So to group these, I could either hit G on the keyboard as a shortcut, or I'm going to come across and use the icon here to group selected objects. When I click on that, you can see that they stop being a dashed line and just go to this kind of pink, purple colour here. So if I click on that, any part of that, then it's going to select the whole thing, and that's now acting as a single object when I make edits to it. So let's come up to the icon here and zoom to fit our 2D view back into our screen area. Now with our newly created group selected, I'd like to rotate that so that it's on a 45-degree angle, and then we can move it up into the corner here. Let's click on the icon to rotate the selected objects, type in 45 for the angle. I'm going to rotate around the middle, hit apply and close. And now what I want to do is just zoom in a little so that I can click on this again and go into the transform mode. I'm going to come to the point in the corner here. You can see the cursor showing me I'm snapping there. I'm going to click on that and I'm going to move this and snap it to this node here. To this point here on the snap grid. So we're just going to click on that, move it up, get it so it's snapping there, and then I can let go, and now that's moved that to that new position. And again, we've used the snap grid to help us to locate that. Now I'm going to come back and click on the zoom to fit icon. We can also use the shortcut key F on the keyboard in order to zoom the 2D view into the window space. Something that's worth being aware of when you import files like we have with this flourish is that the software will create a new layer to put that data on automatically. So if I click on the down arrow on my layer list here, you can see that that data is on a layer called import, showing it was imported, and then dash, and then the name of the file. Remember, this was called flourish.eps. In this case, I'm not too worried about my layer organization, but you'd certainly need to be aware of that if you were using the layers to organize your part. So here I'm just going to hit close. Now I'd like to create a mirrored copy of this across the middle of the part, and then take those two and mirror them about the middle of my ellipse. In order to give me something I can mirror about, I'm going to draw a line across the middle here. So I'm going to come over and click on the icon to draw polyline, and I'm just going to snap to the outside edges here to create a straight line across the middle that we can use, and then right mouse click to accept that line. Now I'm going to select my flourish group, come over to the mirror objects function. First one I'm going to do is going to be around the job center, create a mirrored copy, and this time I want to flip it horizontally. So click on that icon there. Next I'm going to add my original part to the selection, so holding the shift key down, I'm going to click on this group as well, and now I'm also going to continue to hold the shift key down and click to add my line to the selection. Now you should always click the mirror line as the last object, so you click all the objects you want to mirror, then add that mirror line to the selection. Now I can come into here and I can use this button to flip about line, and I want to create a mirrored copy. Make sure that's still checked. Click there, and that's going to use that line as a mirror for the two parts that I had selected and create copies of them. Now we can close that, and I can click on the line, and I'm going to delete it because we no longer need that. Next, I'm going to import another piece of vector art clip art. So I'm going to come over and click on the icon to import vectors from a file. This time I'm going to select the file flower.eps from within the project folder, hit open. You can see again that that's come in, all the pieces of it are selected, so once more it might benefit me to group that together. So I'm going to come over and click on the group selected objects, make that easier to select and manipulate. I'm going to click on it again to go into the transform mode. I'm going to come over the white node here in the corner, and holding the shift key down so that I'm going to scale around the center, I'm going to click and just move the mouse in. So there I'm just zooming in and out to help me see the view better using the mouse wheel. So again, to size that, I can come over this white corner node in the transform mode and holding the shift key down so that I'm scaling around the center, I can just scale that up and down till I'm happy with the way that looks and the position of it. I'm going to come over and zoom to fit now. Come out of the transform mode by clicking on the arrow here to go back into regular selection mode. The last thing I want to do to finish my design off is just move my decorative elements down 1 inch on the panel to balance it a little bit better. Again, we can use our snap grid to do that. I can just drag a box carefully, only selecting the decorative elements here, click on them again to go to the transform mode. I can go over the center point here on my transform handles, click on that, holding the mouse. I'm just going to move it down 1 inch until that snaps to the next point on the snap grid, which I can see by the cursor changing there, and let go. So again, the snap grid is very, very useful to help me if I've got a value in there that's going to be relevant to the jobs that I'm trying to achieve. So let's come back into the selection mode by clicking on the arrow. So our design's finished now, so I'm going to switch off the snap grid. I'm going to hit F4 on the keyboard and just uncheck that and hit OK. And I'm going to go ahead and save this file so that we can use it in the companion tutorial to this when we create the toolpaths. Go up to File, Save As, and in the project folder, we're just going to save this file and call it cabinetdoorvector.crv. Hit Save. So before we conclude, let's just run through a brief summary of some of the steps we've looked at in this example. We started by switching on the snap grid and used that to help us sketch the outline for our part. We also use that to help us node edit the top vector in order to create the curved shape that we've got on our panel. Once we had our outline, we joined the separate vectors together and we offset them inwards to create the inside edge of what's going to be our OG shape. Then we again use the snap grid to help us accurately sketch an ellipse. We offset that ellipse inwards to create the rings in the middle of the part. Then we imported a piece of vector clip art, grouped that together, rotated it, positioned it in the corner and made mirrored copies of it. And then finally imported our flower design and then just scaled that to fit and then moved all our data down 1 inch, again making use of the snap grid function. In the companion tutorial to this, we're going to take this data and create toolpaths on it. That concludes this example.